Welcome to another episode of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. Sam, I'm going to go right past the banter because there's a lot of news that needs to be talked about.
Enough with the quail sauce. Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
Yeah, a couple of these news stories that we're going to talk about today angered me initially, made me full of despair, and then got me a little excited, and then made me angry again.
Sounds like a meandering path to the dark side.
Yeah. So those are the news stories we're going to talk about today. Just very angry stuff. But
Sean's anger.
Sean's anger. In the meantime, please follow us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. You can send us emails at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. And you can listen to us pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. I've noticed lately as I do our statistics, we are most popular on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Those are our two highest grossing streaming services.
Well, is it grossing if we don't get any money? Biggest audience, we'll say.
Sure. Yeah.
And just we should say that the past couple episodes have been a light investigation of Renaissance fairs, sharing our own personal history, but then also featuring a couple of bands that play at Renaissance fairs. One in the Michigan area, the Michigan Renaissance Festival, a band called Wake Fire, and another from the Pacific Northwest area, a band called the Scupper Monkeys. Both of them were fantastic guests, and they make really fun music. So give those episodes a listen and give those bands a listen.
Yes, I've been #blessed to be able to listen to both of them live and can confirm that they are a great time and really make Ren fairs that much more enjoyable. Now for the bad news.
Oh God.
I'm just gonna go straight into it. We're gonna start with Rings of Power, and I'll list. So I'll do something a little different. I'm gonna list all of the news articles that we're gonna listen to, in case one of our listeners just doesn't want to listen to Rings of Power and then wants to jump to later in the episode to listen to whatever news article they want to talk about or hear us talk about. So we're going to do Rings of Power, a couple stories that came out about that. Henry Cavill gets his own topic in this episode. Then we go on.
Henry Cavill corner.
Yep, his own little corner of today's episode. And then Legend of Vox Machina Season 2, followed by God of War. We have news articles on all of those topics we're going to talk about. Sam, why don't you kick us off with what happened in Rings of Power?
Right. So it's been some time since the Rings of Power wrapped up. Kind of immediately, there was a little bit of a critical walk back of early glowing reviews. There were some stories about the showrunners and the kind of the future, little prognosticating about any sort of potential shakeups. And seemingly the first big confirmed shakeup happened relatively recently with Joseph Mawley, who is the actor who plays Adar, announced that he was leaving.
Actor who played
Adar. Yes, no longer. We have a quote pulled from an article in Forbes announcing.
This is what he tweeted.
Oh, he tweeted this. Okay.
He tweeted this. Yeah.
He put it out on the Twitster. I love my time exploring Middle Earth and diving into Tolkien's mythology. I'm so honored that the character was liked. He cared deeply about telling you his story. Though as an actor, it remains my job description to explore new characters and worlds. So
when I read that, I think it's a very polite and political way of saying the show sucks. I no longer want to be attached to it. I'm out. Pretty much that's how I interpreted that. And I keep waiting to hear like if he has any other big properties lined up that he's getting involved with. And there hasn't been anything. And this is like as season 2 is beginning production. I'm pretty sure they've already started production.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is the story that really angered me at first, angered the showrunners angered me because they let Joseph Mawle leave. And then I got full of despair because he was by far my favorite part of season 1. So if you're going to remove him and recast him, which we found out they are going to later in that article, we find out that a guy named Sam Hazeldine, I don't know how it's
maybe, yeah.
Sam is going to replace Joseph Mawle as the character of Adar. So they're not writing Adar off. They are recasting him, which is one of my biggest pet peeves in all media in terms of like film and TV. I can't stand when they recast actors in the middle of movies, in the middle of series. They did it with Game of Thrones, who is the Daenerys' side piece when she's still in Essos.
Oh, Dario
yes.
Naharis.
It was like season 1, and then all of a sudden season 2, it's a different guy, and like they look
nothing alike,
and they don't look anything alike.
They look nothing, and both of those characters look nothing like maybe the first version looked a little bit more like him, but he's supposed to be like have blue hair, and I think he's Tyroshi, which in George R.R. Martin's world, the Tyroshi warriors are really flamboyant and colorful and whatnot. But that was probably the most prominent recasting in Game of Thrones in its 8 seasons. I haven't put a ton of pre-thought this. I know, well, the Mountain was recast a couple times, but he was not a major character until later in the season. And this Adar was the primary antagonist.
He was your bad guy.
I mean, obviously Sauron was always there in the background, and then we learned in the final episode that no, Sauron was actually just there all the time, but he was not, the character Sauron was not obviously an antagonist in the story, whereas Adar was, and widely praised in his performance, popular with the fans based on what we saw. And do you think there's any chance that he was pushed out as opposed to leaving voluntarily?
I don't think there's anything to that. I can't imagine, unless he's like behind the scenes, like just shitting on the series the entire time in front of showrunners, directors, talking about how discontent he is. But I don't know. I think it's more of the first season was not received very well. I don't know. If you don't want to be attached to it anymore, I guess that's what it is. And we talked about it before we started recording. We also talked about how season 1 of Rings of Power took 3+ years to create. So if you're an actor and you have to devote a substantial amount of your time to be in one of these series, that limits the amount of other things you can do. And to me, that is a hint on what he's saying. It's his duty to explore other characters and worlds. Maybe he just felt like with the time commitment to Rings of Power, he doesn't have the ability to explore other characters and worlds. So, I don't know. But if you're the showrunners, you should definitely have done whatever you could to retain by far the best actor, or at least the best performance that you were given by one of the actors. You should have retained them. We're going to watch season 2 because it's Middle Earth, it's Rings of Power, and our show is called Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. So when season 2 comes out, we definitely can't not watch it. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm bothered by this news. You want to at least name the other actors? So when they announced that the Sam Hazeldine is replacing Joseph Mawle, they also listed a few other actors who were joining the series in season 2.
Well, and real quick before we go into that, list of names that are not very familiar to most listeners. I wonder if you mentioned season 2 is in, I think, pre-production. I don't know if they've moved into actually filming yet. I wonder if this departure was prompted by the actor learning what they plan to do with the character in season 2. And that was, I have to imagine, a compelling story would have at least changed his calculus and said, this is going to be, worth the commitment, even if it takes 2.5 years to finish season 2. And that shuts me out of however many other productions I would like to do. I think at this point where every story I've seen says 2024. So we're talking about all of 2023, no Rings of Power, some form of production happening. And then into 2024, we can imagine if season 1 had a fall release, they're probably shooting for a fall release again. So that's a year and 9 months or so until we have season 2. So that's a big time commitment. I also, he could be reading the writing on the wall and like, listen, there's a Game of Thrones. There's talk about a Jon Snow show. I don't think he's in line to have his character resurrected there, but
again,
yeah. But there's other shows coming out. We'll talk about some of them later on in this episode, but there's plenty of opportunity if he even within the Amazon space. So it might be just didn't like the direction, didn't like the timeline. And I think a lot of that comes back down to the feet of the showrunners.
Yeah. And we had discussed with that 3-year time frame to produce one season. They had mentioned they're trying to learn from past production and move forward, and 2 years to produce one season still seems like a very long time. And I feel like most series will, not like constantly be in production, might take a few months off as they get into the next season. But and this is one question I would like to ask the showrunners for them to tell me. When did the work with the actors stop in production for season 1? Because we were given the show September 2022. When did the presence of the actors not be necessary for production? And why wait until the end of season 1, like the final episode is released to the public, to then even start production? You know what I mean?
I have a speculative answer, which I would be willing to put money on, which is they didn't know what they're going to do in season 2. And if you look at some of their comments, especially toward on the Amazon, the Rings of Power podcast, I haven't listened to any whole episodes. This is based on excerpts. So take it, grain of salt, context matters, whatever. Their comments reflect that there's not an objective reality to the show. It's unclear. I think this was especially the case with their discussion of The Stranger. They did not commit that it was Gandalf.
Oh, because we talked about like they're creating mystery boxes without knowing what the mystery is.
Yes, and this is mystery box. This is the potential downside of mystery box is that even your showrunners don't know what you're doing. There's no objective reality to the show. So when you are pitching a character to an actor, if you have Joseph Mawle in your office or you're taking him out to lunch and you're talking about the character and he says, okay, so what's his arc going to be I know there are 5 seasons. Does he die at the end of season 1? What's he going to do? And if the answer is, we don't really know, that's not compelling. You'll sign up. Maybe you want the money, you want the publicity. It's going to help your career. But if there's no real case, obviously he was not committed to the story of Adar over the next season at least, and potentially other seasons if that's where that character goes. But when you don't actually know what's happening in your show, it's going to cause these long delays. There's some of their comments made it seem as if they were going to respond to audience feedback and audience criticisms, which if we get a better show, fine. But artistically, that is not, there's not a lot of integrity there.
Yeah. And what's possibly even more damning too, I read an article from Collider this morning. Season 2 has been greenlit, but Rings of Power hasn't even had season 3 greenlit yet. from the beginning, they've been planning a 5-season series. But in terms of what actually has the green light to go ahead, just season 2. Season 3 hasn't even been confirmed yet.
I would be shocked if we don't get at least a third season. They spent so much money acquiring this IP and producing season 1. They need to make it back. And as I hate, it's kind of a good money following bad, a sunk cost fallacy that you've got to keep going. But it would be so damaging right now to Amazon Studios if they pulled the plug on the show, or if they did a major reimagining. I think they have to power forward, and it'll be incremental at best, right? It's going to be trying to push an ocean liner in a different direction. There's so much money and inertia built up behind this show.
Well, just to go through the other actors in case any of you know the name, we start with Gabriel Akwudike, Yasin Zaitz Atur, Ben Daniels, Amelia Kenworthy, Nia Towley, Sam Hazeldine, Nicholas Woodson. Now, when I was reading through these, the only one, I actually had to Google them so I could look at faces as well. The only one that I actually recognized was Ben Daniels, who appears in Rogue One as the higher ranking rebel officer that gives Andor the secret mission to kill Jyn Erso's dad, Galen. And he makes a couple other appearances in the movie as well. But that's the only thing that I recognize him from. And I don't really know any of the other actors. I see like Yasin Zaitz Atur was in The Witcher, but when I Googled a picture of him, nothing really stood out to me as like a memory jog. So I don't know. Just in general, not great news on the Rings of Power front. I'm hoping that the actor who is being recast as Adar can give me at least 75% of what Joseph Mawley was giving me. I don't know. Just bleak.
I did not recognize the name, but Nicholas Woodson was in Rome, a show that I liked. I did not watch it when it came out because it came out, I think, over 15 years ago. Ran for 2 seasons, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more than that, but pulled the plug. He had was not a starring role, but it was a big role. He was Caesar's head slave who was pulling a lot of the strings at Caesar's behest, or being a middleman for Caesar in a variety of different things. So he had a lot of screen time, but ultimately his role was not central to the story. And that was the second credit that was listed here. These other folks, I'm familiar with Peaky Blinders. I haven't seen it. It's probably a show that I would like. Did you watch Peaky Blinders at one point?
I watched the first couple seasons. I haven't finished the series. It kind of lost me after a few seasons, but it was good.
I know Tom Hardy is in it at later seasons, who is an inspirational figure for me. Inspirational from a facial hair and haircut perspective.
Okay. Well, what else in terms of Rings of Power? Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, there were some very small headline things. I don't know how much of this is clickbait or trying to stay relevant. There was some speculation that the showrunners were going to be sidelined. What's her name? JD something or other, and Patrick McKay. JD Payne and Patrick McKay. Those are their. Yeah, I think that's right. Anyway, there was speculation that they would be shunted aside and really have a role in the writer's room, and there'd be other folks who'd be in charge of helming the production. I think I don't know who specifically said the line about, oh, we're learning from season 1, but it's still just astonishing to me that a show with this big of a budget, with this brand name, would be given to people who were completely inexperienced, rather, both from a production standpoint and did not really have strong writing creds. So I think this would be, I would not complain. I think there are probably a lot of people who could do a better job running the show than those two did. it still concerns me that they would be in the writing room, because the product so far has been most disappointing from a writing standpoint. And then the other news story that I saw maybe earlier this week or late last week was the directors have already been lined up for season 2, and it's an all-female lineup. And I think they even maybe fired or let go a male director and replaced him with a woman, which to me it's interesting to me that was the headline, and not the optimism about the quality of the show in season 2 based on who they have directing, or the previous exploits of the directors. But it's this relatively ultimately unimportant to a creative endeavor factoid. So we'll see. I think might be just struggling for attention in a media space right now that is pretty crowded.
Well, all I know is I want whichever director who is responsible for that horse scene in episode like 4 or 5 or whatever it is, I want them to never direct again. And I don't know who they are. I can go back and look up the name of the director, but there were so many times during Rings of Power where we looked at it and went, who is giving direction to these actors? And, if that means all the men need to get fired, then I'm all for it. Honestly, throw everybody off the ship that created season 1. Anybody who had anything negative to do with season 1 off the ship. That's my opinion at this point.
Yeah. The horse person should be forced to forever wear around their neck a huge blow up still shot of that screen. And they should have to walk into every meeting wearing a necklace, a huge poster sized necklace showing that screen grab. And that can be their walking resume. I feel like Jeff Bezos could probably arrange that.
He probably could. He's got enough money. The only other scene that I can recall at the top of my head that we were like, oh God, the direction was so bad, was that fucking soap opera scene.
I knew you were going to say that.
in the Southlands, when you have Elendil, like, oh God, I could completely, my brain had like ejected that scene from my memory until we started talking about bad direction. That it immediately came back.
I'm sorry to reopen that wound.
That's okay. I need to move on now. Next up, we have Cavill's Corner. We have a couple news articles. Henry Cavill has been in the news a lot in the last couple of weeks. So we'll start with the first news article in our timeline. Henry Cavill is out as Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher after this current season, which comes out this year in 2023. How does that make you feel, Sam?
So I'm a big fan of Hank, as I call him. First of all, by all accounts, a stand-up guy, just classy. His exit from The Witcher, I think I did not have this idea originally, but I agree with this take that I heard, and I can't recall where I heard it, but just complimenting his announcement that he was leaving. Waited for Liam Hemsworth, the actor who's replacing him, to be lined up. Completely complimentary, did not do anything on his way out the door to insult or cast aspersions on anybody associated with the production. And we have reason to believe that he was not entirely happy with how things were going, and very much could have told why he was leaving. Instead, it was to pursue other opportunities, which we'll talk about. So I don't like.
We also have known Henry Cavill is a huge fan of the books, of the Witcher books and the video games. And when he took the role on, he said he'd be happy to play the role as long as he felt like the showrunners and the writers were respecting the material. Now, season 1 of The Witcher, and The Witcher is on our list of things to review and cover, and we will do that at some point. Season 1 of The Witcher is pretty similar to the books. Now, I know I've convinced you to go through and read them, or at least listen to them, correct?
Correct.
So season 1 is very similar to the books. Season 2 is so far from the books. It's not shocking to me that Henry Cavill, who professes to love the material, love the books, love the characters, love the video games, would be taken aback at how different the the show material is from the original material. I don't know. There's so many things that go into this, like Henry Cavill leaving. Again, we have another recast story, which I don't like. It's so jarring to me to have an actor be a character in seasons 1, 2, and 3. All of the other characters are going to stay the same, and they're just going to have somebody else jump in and have a different take on Geralt. And it's like, I don't know, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, first, let's say Liam Hemsworth, a little bit more of a higher up on the list of replacement actors. I don't think he has the same.
Liam Hemsworth is my third favorite Hemsworth.
Or I don't even know who the second Hemsworth would be.
He was in. He was also in Hunger Games.
I thought that was Liam Hemsworth.
No, I think he's like the middle Hemsworth. I don't know, but Liam Hemsworth hasn't really done anything where I'm like, oh yeah, he's great in this.
So let me amend my remarks. I thought Liam Hemsworth was in Hunger Games.
He is. He plays Katniss Everdeen's side piece. But the other Hemsworth, the third Hemsworth, is also in the Hunger Games. I remember he's with, what's the guy he died? Famous actor.
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yes. He's in a scene with Philip Seymour Hoffman. Now, I preface this, I'm really ignorant when it comes to Hunger Games. I watched it once, like years ago. Honestly, I don't give a shit about the series. I don't really enjoy it that much.
Hey, well, Jennifer Lawrence paving the way for female action stars.
Oh, that's right. Didn't she say she was the
first ever lead role for a woman in an action film?
What a dingus.
Yeah. Somewhere, I guess she also invented a time machine so that Sigourney Weaver could go back and star an Alien in 1979.
Yeah. So I like Liam Hemsworth, fine, sure. If you're going to have someone come in to replace Geralt or Henry Cavill as Geralt, I guess Liam Hemsworth is fine. But the bigger issue is you're going to have an actor who has a different take on the character, and it's going to look so out of place. And it's one of those where I'm like, what could you have done to have kept Henry Cavill? You know what I mean?
I think it comes back to the writer's room.
But they've said season 3 is going to be more or season 3 and on is going to be more in line with the books. They've come out and said that. So did you already lose Henry Cavill?
I think so. Yeah, I think this is damage control. I think that there was probably, he saw where season 4 was going to go, didn't like it. Maybe he voiced that early enough where they tried to do something different, wasn't a big enough shift, got pushback from whoever is responsible for driving that story, and that was it. And maybe he's like, the other thing with Henry Cavill is that for him, he doesn't need The Witcher, right? At least he didn't need The Witcher at the point when he announced that he was leaving, because he was the keystone in a pretty major expanded universe. But I don't think he's going to be hurting for work, right? This is kind of what draws, contrast this with the Joseph Mawley leaving Rings of Power. It's like, I don't know if he's going to go out and be the lead in a major franchise, right? That's less likely with Joseph Mawley as opposed to Henry Cavill, who was probably one, if available, right at the top of a lot of people's lists.
Well, that leads us, you mentioned a little tidbit about Henry Cavill not needing other work.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads us in our timeline of Cavill's Corner to the next article, which was a few days after he announced he wasn't coming back to The Witcher. We find out that in Black Adam, spoiler alert, he makes an appearance as Superman in like the post credits or something. Now, I haven't seen Black Adam yet. This is all from articles. So it could be the end of the movie. It could be post credit scene. Henry Cavill makes an appearance as Superman in Black Adam. He then announces that he will be returning to the role as Superman. Cut to a few weeks later. So that was October sometime. A few weeks later, DC announces that James Gunn has been brought on to co-lead the DC cinematic universe, where we discover that he is writing his own Superman movie and is recasting Superman with a younger actor, and announces that Henry Cavill will not be returning. Now, as just a brief overview, this is my commentary on DC, the cinematic universe. This is needed. James Gunn should have the creative power to scrap the whole thing and start from scratch. And when we think about like these characters or these actors who play these characters, Henry Cavill, it's been almost 10 years since Man of Steel, a decade ago. Think about Aquaman and all these other movies. Like, these actors are getting into the later stages of playing these characters. That'd be like Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark coming on when he was at the end of his run with Marvel. You know what I mean? So if James Gunn is looking at the far future of the DC cinematic universe, he's pretty much got to start from scratch, right?
You know who you should get?
Who?
The other Hemsworth.
Liam?
No, the third Hemsworth.
The third Hemsworth.
Yeah. Just to make this whole thing complete, a Hemsworth has now replaced Henry Cavill in 2 major roles. No, but I mean, I have to imagine Henry Cavill is not very happy with his agent right now, and maybe vice versa. Because if I am Superman, I've got to put into my contract that I have the right of first refusal in the next Superman movie coming out from your studio. It seems like a missed opportunity for him to secure that. Because he knows that the DC expanded universe has not been particularly successful, and so a move like this was potentially in the offing. Like, I'm sure Robert Downey Jr. was not worried that Marvel was going to go in a different direction with Iron Man before the conclusion of the saga, because he was so central and it was so successful, and they had everything planned out. There was no indication that DC was like that. And so you want that security. You should say, I'm your Superman unless I don't want to be. And that's the condition of me coming back for, the cameo in Black Adam or whatever his role prior to that was. I guess, would that have been Justice League?
The last time as Superman? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would have been Justice League. You know who they should get to recast Superman? Nicolas Cage.
Has Nicolas Cage made noise about that? Like, he wants to do it?
Well, in the 90s, he almost did. And he even went in for like a costume fitting. And there's pictures of him. You can look him up online, of Nick Cage in the Superman outfit that he was going to use in the 90s.
Who played Superman in the Superman movie that came out before Man of Steel? That's a fun trivia question that we're not going to be able to answer in real time. They should do something like the Spider-Man Far From Home, or not Far From Home, but No Way Home, and get all the Superman actors into the same movie. That'd be funny, including Dean Cain.
Can't they do it with I'm far more familiar with Marvel than I am DC. Even before the cinematic universe, I only ever read Marvel comics. I never really read DC. But there's got to be like time travel, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they have multiple Earths.
Oh, it was Brandon Routh was the last in Superman Returns in 2006.
What has he been in since then? But he's available, James Gunn. If you want a Supermen.
Brandon Routh, I actually think, was in a lot of the CW.
Okay, that makes sense.
Didn't he come back for like some CW stuff?
Ooh, breaking news story. He has just been announced in Rings of Power season 3. Just kidding.
I thought you were going to say, breaking news, Brandon Routh, new Superman in the DCEU.
I mean, he looks like a Superman.
He looks fine. I'm just so salty on all of this goddamn fantasy news. After the Superman news comes out, he is then tied to another series through Amazon Prime, Warhammer 40K. Now, I'm super ignorant when it comes to Warhammer. I know nothing about it. I know it's like a tabletop game, right? Where you can get miniatures. Yes. I had a friend in college who was super into it, and he would just paint miniatures in the attic all the time. Cool guy. But I mean, I don't, I know nothing about it. So if you want to enlighten me as to your basic knowledge of Warhammer quick, I would appreciate it. But the overarching story is Henry Cavill will star in and will be involved with a Warhammer show.
So Warhammer 40,000 is set in the future. I don't know if the 40,000 refers to 40,000 years after a certain point. I think it does, but I don't think it's like 40,000 AD. Could be wrong. I'm not a war. I don't claim to know a lot about Warhammer. It's a multi-civilization state of war. I think there's a human-based, I think they're Terran, called the Terran Empire or whatever, and there's a god emperor type figure who leads the Terran Empire, who turned all of the continent of Europe into his own palace or residence or something like that. So I'd say for maybe Henry Cavill would play him, but I think he's in a coma or something, depending on where you are in the timeline. And there are space orcs and space elves and space undead and other alien species. I think this is the Space Marine, the Space Marine characters. You go too far out there, and my knowledge of Warhammer starts to bleed in with my knowledge of StarCraft, which is limited, hence why they bleed over into one another. This is actually related to one of our other stories, the God of War story, I would say, with just the continued search for established brands that can be translated into shows and movies. I don't think we want to turn this podcast into a lament about the lack of originality in contemporary Hollywood, but
well, I'll even go so far as to say, as long as they're using material that they haven't found success with yet, and they're going to give me something that's good, then I'm okay with it. Like if they're going to,
I think the problem is giving you something good. Yeah, it's much easier said than done. And
so we've talked about it. Like there's very few video game portrayals in other forms of media that are successful, and there's a huge list of video games that have been turned into movies or TV series that have failed horrifically. So I'm okay if they keep going back to something that hasn't had an adaptation made. It's when you over and over give me or try to recreate an adaptation of something that's going to really turn me off.
Yeah, 8-year-old Sam loved the Mortal Kombat movie.
That's a good movie.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's good by objective cinematic standards, but that is a great movie that doesn't try to do too much because it knows that it's based on
it knows what it is.
Fighting video game. Yeah.
Did you see the new one?
No.
The new one's good. Coming from me, who's not a critic.
I will see if Haley wants to watch that in our Friday night movie roundup. Right now, we're in the middle of holiday movies.
Oh, gross.
Yeah. Apparently, Die Hard is not a holiday movie in her mind, nor is Gremlins. It's set during Christmas.
I know the story of Die Hard, but Gremlins, I guess, yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so we were talking about Warhammer 40K. Yeah. Oh, my point about the taking these established brands, be it Tolkien, be it video game franchises or tabletop gaming franchises. There's only that the brand names themselves are worth something because there's an existing fan base. I don't know the size of the fan base for Warhammer 40K. And so very likely what we're going to see is something that offends the actual fans, doesn't do anything that new, so is to a casual consumer is going to be largely indistinguishable from any other generic space fantasy thing, and ultimately is forgettable because it's too dangerous to do something new. Otherwise, just create your own IP, and you can't. I'm sure that it would be nearly impossible to adapt faithfully the Warhammer 40K story because it is so sprawling, as it was not originally designed to be a season or multiple seasons of a show.
Well, that's why you bring on Henry Cavill.
So back to Henry Cavill, if we can round out Cavill's corner.
Yep.
Hank, listen to me, man. Listen to me, baby. Call HBO and say, what do I have to do to be your Aegon Targaryen? that is the prequel show that we need, is the Aegon the Conqueror, starring Henry Cavill and his two sister wives. We can talk about what that casting would be. I don't have a ton of ideas, but I'm sure I could get some real quick. I remember when the final season of Game of Thrones came out, and there was all the speculation about Jon Snow picking up the mantle of Azor Ahai, the savior of the world, and doing all this cool stuff. And none of that didn't really pan out as people really wanted it to. But there were a lot of memes with Henry Cavill wearing dragon armor and being kind of this heroic figure, the Azor Ahai figure. I think he would be awesome in House of the Dragon. I don't know all of the characters well enough to say exactly who he could be, but I bet there's going to be some fun knight figures, some lords that are going to be involved in the Dance of Dragons. There's the Jon Snow sequel series that apparently is moving forward. I'm not really enthusiastic about that series, but give me Henry Cavill as a wildling leader, or maybe some northern lord, or somehow in the orbit of that show. Come on, go to Game of Thrones, Henry.
You know what I want Henry Cavill to do? Return to The Witcher. Just
that too.
I mean, we've talked so much about how he was like the perfect casting of Geralt of Rivia, and his mannerisms he has like on point. Just please, Henry, go back.
Yeah, or Henry, you and Joe Manganiello and some other people should start a D&D live play.
Oh, I'd like to see Henry Cavill in the next D&D movie.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we should talk about that.
Well,
because
before we talk about that, I
Yes.
just want one quick sidebar. You had mentioned the last item on our outline for news,
yes.
It's just a throwaway because we know nothing about it and very little has been released about it. But all we know is that Amazon Prime Studios has the rights and are planning on creating a God of War series. I've never played any of the games. I bought God of War 2 for the PlayStation 2. So I'm going to play through that to learn a little bit more. And I know everybody loves like Ragnarok, the new God of War game that just came out. But just to throw that out there to keep on your radar, we have a new God of War series coming down the runway. So what were you going to say?
It'll be disappointing. I'm sure it'll disappoint most fans and be forgettable. I can't wait for a lot of
most video game content is.
Exactly. I will be interested to see who signs on to Amazon after seeing what they have done thus far with these other franchises. Who's putting out the Warhammer 40K? Is that also Amazon, or is that somebody else?
I believe I read it was Amazon. Why don't you talk about D&D quick, the movie, and I will Google, or not Google. I will use a search engine to discover. I don't want to endorse Google on our podcast.
So there is, I don't know the exact release date. I think it's sometime in the spring of 2023. A D&D movie, Dungeons and Dragons movie. I believe Chris Pine is the lead, or at least his name is prominent in the marketing for the movie. There are, I think, at least one trailer out. I've watched it once, kind of putting it on the back burner because we will cover that when it comes out. It looks to be a little bit more, at least the trailer was more kind of goofy in many ways. A lot, maybe they just picked all the comedy bits out of the movie, but it could be an interesting, less serious portrayal of Dungeons and Dragons, similar to Vox Machina, a show that we have talked about pretty glowingly here, The Legend of Vox Machina on Amazon. So when that happens, when that show or when that movie comes out, we'll be talking about it. And then in the run up to that movie, we are also going to watch I think it's 2000 or 2001 Dungeons and Dragons movie starring Jeremy Irons, among others, which is widely derided, but could be a good, bad movie. So we will be watching that and discussing. So get yourselves ready for that, however you choose to. I
did discover the Warhammer show is through Amazon Prime.
Okay. So
and my brief commentary on the D&D film, I think it looks great. It looks really funny. It also has Hugh Grant in it as well. It just seems like a slapsticky mini campaign set in the D&D world. So if you haven't seen the trailer, it's basically this group of thieves steals something for someone who pays them to do it. And it turns out the thing that they stole was like a tiara or something, but it was very magical. And they basically stole it for someone who's evil. And now they're going to use it for evil purposes. And they have a change of heart and try to stop the bad thing from happening. So that's the gist of the plot line. I'm really excited. In the trailer, we see mimics, we see gelatinous cubes, we see owl bears. There's so many different classic D&D monsters that show up. So I'm excited for it. I think it'll be entertaining, and I'm excited to review it with you as well.
Don't try too hard. Make it funny. Make it tongue-in-cheek. Don't try to do quote unquote period or regional accents. Just have the people play. It needs to be like people playing Dungeons and Dragons at home, where you go back and forth between humor and action, and none of it is that serious. And the villains are goofy, and you gotta pull it off. It takes the right kind of creative team to do that. Speaking of the right kind of creative team, let's move on into our final section, shall we? Which is The Legend of Vox Machina. Season 2 is going to be released January 20th. This space will be covering season 2. We believe it'll be released in sets of 3 episodes coming out per week. So that is, we will cover 3 episodes at a time. And are these voice actors that have been announced for season 2 upcoming, or for season 3, which was announced recently?
Yeah, these are season 2, and these are the. So we talked about when we covered season 1 how fantastic of a job they did with bringing in guest voice actors for season 1, and we had asked the question into the universe. Oh, I wonder how good they're going to be at getting guest actors for season 2. And they knocked it out of the park. As we look at this list, we have Henry Winkler, Lance Reddick, Cheech Marin, Will Friedle. Complementing our Dominic Monaghan, we have Billy Boyd in season 2, Cree Summer, and Ralph Ineson. Like, those are relatively big names to pull into your second season of the show.
Yeah, I'm most excited, I think. Well, I love me some Ralph Ineson, Game of Thrones alum. He was great in The Witch.
He's got a very nice, low voice.
Yes, very distinct look too. He is, I mean, obviously this is an animated show, but the actor is one that I appreciate. Also, I think appearing in season 2 is Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, who along with Will Friedle were in the live stream, and I'm assuming that they're going to voice the characters that they portrayed in some way, shape, or form. I think that we're probably not going to see their story adapted whole cloth from the live stream. Cheech Marin is fun. I think that's one where probably younger folks don't really appreciate who Cheech Marin is as much. We're like I'd say we're probably like right on the cusp of knowing of
people knowing who he is.
Yeah. With Billy Boyd, I hope that they just keep getting Lord of the Rings people. They should get the entire fellowship. Like, go over to Sean Bean's house and be like, hey, can you just say this line real quick into the microphone? Just get as many of them as you can.
I'd like it even more if they keep killing him too. It'd be so funny if they come on for a season, die at the end of the season.
Yeah, it would be very fitting for Sean Bean's character to die.
It would be.
Yeah, but no, that would be fun. Looking forward to that.
The ones that, so you already said I was excited about Billy Boyd. Henry Winkler, I mean, come on. He's amazing. But I have 2 that I think will be one of these 2 will be voicing Thordak. I think it's either Ralph Ineson or Lance Reddick. They both have ominous, intense voices. If you don't know Lance Reddick, he was most recently in the failed Resident Evil show on Netflix.
I know him from The Wire, and I don't recall his voice being remarkably deep.
Well, not remarkably, but I could see him being Thordak. A little audio manipulation.
I'm thinking of some of the villains in this series. I think we're going to get the Umbrasyl fight in Western with
Multiple dragons. Yeah.
multiple dragon, but also what is the name is escaping me.
Oh,
Grog's uncle, Kevdak.
Yeah.
Kevdak. I could see him, that character having a one of these voice actors part. That could be Lance Reddick or Ralph. Now that you've said it, I can't not hear Thordak's voice with Ralph Ineson. That low gravel.
Do you think Henry Winkler plays Pike's grandpa?
Yes, I saw that.
It's been announced.
Yeah, he will play Will Hand Trickfoot, which is great. I hope it's. I'm looking forward to the what's his. I should know all this stuff. His character in Arrested Development.
Oh, I can't.
Attorney. I can't remember his name. He's very good though. Yeah.
But this was actually good news. Like we had a bunch of bad news. I guess announcing that Henry Cavill's in a new Warhammer show is good, and there's a God of War show coming out is good news. But there was so much bad that when we were going through the show notes for this, and we actually had good news with Legends of Vox Machina, I was pretty excited.
Yeah, this is fun. We're about a month away from the release of season 2 of The Legend of Vox Machina. We know that there's a season 3. We're looking forward to that. And as news continues to come out with developments on these fronts, be it what next series of misfortunate events will befall Henry Cavill, I almost said Cavill, or what latest thing is happening with the Rings of Power that makes us pessimistic. Although we will probably forget all about that in the 10 years it'll take to come out with season 2.
Yeah, Sam and I will be taking a 2-week hiatus for the holidays. Happy Hanukkah and Christmas. What are we on? Day 2 of Hanukkah right now? This is
Monday.
Night
2. Yeah, second candle. 2 candles tonight.
Yeah, so all of you Hanukkah practitioners, Mazel Tov. I don't know if that's a bad thing to say. Sam, was that a bad thing to say?
I'll allow it.
Okay. And all of you Christmas goers and all of you who don't believe anything, well, have a good couple weeks.
Enjoy your winter solstice.
Yes. Sam and I, this is a hobby for us, so we're going to take some time off to be with family. And if we got paid to do this, maybe we would do a couple episodes. So I guess if you want to hear more content, at least get us to 1,000 listeners every month, and then we'd actually make money off of this. But because it's a hobby and only like a handful of people listen to us, yeah, we're taking some time off. God damn it.
Or I'd say, or if this is the bot that listens to any podcast that covers the Rings of Power, hey, Amazon, send us a check, man. We will change our tune real quick.
Oh,
we are not above it.
Jeff Bezos, longtime listener, I can be bought. Yeah. And I'm pretty cheap. So send me a check.
Yeah. We are, let's say that we are as connected to our critical viewpoints. Are the passion that we feel about the show is equivalent to the talent that your showrunners put into the show. So yeah, so we can be bought for sure.
And with that, take some time, go back and listen to our previous episodes. We will be back early January with a new episode. What did we decide? We're going to cover the animated Hobbit. Is that what we're going to do?
Yes, the animated Hobbit film. So now is a great time. You got hopefully you all will have some days off coming up. The animated Hobbit. I think it's available on streaming on a variety of platforms. I have it on DVD. So
I also own it on DVD.
I also have it on VHS. I just do not have a VCR. So if you want to enjoy some really just fantastic adaptation of the works of J.R. Tolkien, watch the animated Hobbit and then listen to us discuss it in the new year.
Mazel tov, everybody.
Bye.